Hello, my name is Alex Wickson, and this is my final project's critical study film. The practices I'm going to talk about, my own and those of others, are all about words. Narrative and language are the crux of these projects, creating the umbrella theme that they all shelter beneath. I truly believe that the work created here is the closest my practice has yet been to my true passions as a designer, writer, and beyond. Previous projects have touched upon many concepts, themes, and processes for me. Despite this, systems often presented itself as a unifying through line, so I knew I wanted to carry this forward to begin with. Writing and words in general have been a big interest of mine for a long time, but were yet to become integrated properly into my design process until this point. The idea of typographic practice had somewhat driven me away from combining writing and design, but I'm realizing now that my process isn't exactly typographic. It adheres to the meaning of words, which is supplemented through their form. My practice is linguistic. Having looked briefly into Oulipo practitioners for an earlier project, this became the root of my initial research. The Oulipo standard of using systemic restrictions to fuel creativity in writing was fascinating, and I was drawn to it when I saw that it touched upon many of the concepts I was interested in. Having looked far into it before, I was somewhat driven away from Oulipo as a research pillar, as it offers a particularly exclusionary gallery of practitioners. Of them, I was interested in Raymond Queneau and his books 100,000 Billion Poems and Exercises in Style, the latter of which retells the same story in different ways repeatedly. This helped me to understand the distinction between my work and what will be called typography, as the narrative element of this practice was what spoke to me the most, yet the project was still graphically expressive. I was also interested in Georges Perec's book, Avoid, which is written entirely without the letter E. Moving on from traditional Oulipo, this directed me to the work of Christian Book, particularly Eunoia, a book almost a spiritual sibling to Avoid, as it uses an exclusive vowel per chapter. His other works, the Xenotext and Crystallography, were also influential, most notably Crystallography, as it introduced me to pataphysics, or not real physics, through the study of language as a crystallization process. I also explored the erasure work of Jeremy Benequin, Anne Goretta's genderless narrative Sphinx, Italo Calvino's works of metafiction, Mark Dunn's Eliminope, and Sophie Cole's address book. The address book was the first part of my research to directly underpin the creation of my first book, Dose. It deeply explores and interprets a source, giving its undivided attention to a found address book and using the information in it to paint a picture of its owner. The idea that became Dose started from the idea of creating something that interprets. I looked then at the work of Kenneth Goldsmith, most notably the book number 111, which categorizes phrases ending in a variation of the R sound into chapters by syllable and within chapters alphabetically. The culmination of seemingly unrelated phrases collected over a 4-year period to create something with such a clear system and rhythm made this work stand out to me as something to explore and draw from in Dose. This also drove me to consider the use and recontextualization of originally mundane text, so here began my mission to extract narrative. These practitioners primarily fueled the writing and creation of Dose, which distills narrative from the content of a medical information leaflet for medication that I take, fluoxetine. Parallel to Oulipo-style constraints, the book consists of 4 chapters, each with 4 spreads, each dedicated to preserving a narrative from the leaflet. The right-hand pages house increasing numbers of the pills themselves, both counting the spreads and serving as a reminder of the tiny object that all these words pertain to. The first section extracts the leaflet's kindness, leaving most of the pages blank to demonstrate its scarcity, certainly prompted by the erasure work of Jeremy Benequin. I wanted to preserve the link to the original leaflet in its typesetting, using Humanist 521, a digitization of Gill Sans. Considering its negative implications, Gill Sans became part of the overarching idea that the original leaflet was not considered as to be read, so my distillation of narratives was an absolute U-turn from its initial context. Using this type, as well as the 160 by 140 mm size, which the original leaflet can fold to, the 80 GSM paper, and the blister pack cover imagery, Dose presents as an obvious contortion of itself. The second section isolates all commands and instructions, pitting them against each other in conflict. It satirizes the leaflet's attempt to instruct, changing its meaning entirely. When making it, I drew a mental link between this book and mythological retellings such as those of Madeline Miller. It retells the mythology of fluoxetine. The third section presents a static of inflammatory words, almost as an expression of how it feels to read them. All the space is taken by phrases that spark fear. The fourth section categorizes all the medical jargon words, separating them by syllable in Goldsmith-esque fashion, reordering them alphabetically and redrawing the original words with indistinguishable lines. The result is as readable as they were to begin with. Again, not designed to be read. The categorization of syllables in the fourth section sparked an interest in word composition, driving me directly into Project 2, Supernormal Septology. Molecular typography served as the first research directly underpinning my second book. The idea of letters being made from repeating pieces and the idea of letters and words as organic became integral. The examining and deconstructing featured in that concept became a core element of supernormoceptology, and looking at type itself as the art made me want to explore this further in my work. Extensive etymological research followed, so I had time to consider how my knowledge on word composition, prefixes, suffixes, and morphemes might aid the work. I was interested mainly in the idea of words being defined by their pieces, not the word itself. A word becomes a congregation of meanings, and I wanted to explore that in my work, because it prompts thinking about where meanings come from, and it humanizes language. I spoke with Guy Bigland at the Pages Artist Book Fair where Dose was being sold, who makes work akin to my own, and a book of his, Uncertainty, reminded me of Connaugh's 100,000 Billion Poems, and both contributed heavily to the form of supernormoceptology. It is separated in 4 sections, into prefixes, morphemes referring to nouns, morphemes referring to verbs, and suffixes. There are 50 of each, and every one is defined along the side of the page in such a way that every possible definition reads as a coherent sentence. Over 6 million words can be made, some of which already exist, but most of which do not, yet they can all be accurately defined by their pieces. Blank pages at the front allow for varying page combinations, and the title itself serves as a new definable word, meaning the study of taking a pattern beyond. I think this book hits a lot of points that I want my practice to hit, in that it's interactive and systemic, in a way that recontextualizes something and prompts a new thinking. After it was made, I wanted to return to the idea of type as organism, and I did so in my third project, Type Arms. Typographic Specimens, A Natural History of Letterforms, by Andrew Bainbridge, came to my attention, a book that creates animals from letterforms through a fictional narrative about a 19th century explorer, which brought my research back around to pataphysics and crystallography. Type Arms explores my own pataphysics concept of anatomical type, the natural connection I made between word pieces joining together and body parts. Anatomical diagrams visually informed this project to a strong extent, and its system of bone, veins, and muscle made from type was made on top of an overlay of many anatomical textbook pages. I was also interested in the connected concept of organic type, particularly bio-inspired type, and the thematic connection between type and nature. My previous fungal projects helped with this. As a finished project, the series of pieces that make up Type Arms are visually meaty, and for that I am proud. To me, these projects come together to help define my practice. It is one of categorizing and systemizing, but also of narrative and story, and also of words and meanings. I'm reluctant to call it typographic, because I don't see that as an accurate descriptor nor centric to my practice, though much of the work focuses on type. Looking back, I'm proud of these projects and how they handle their conceptual frameworks, and moving forward, I've considered greatly how I might fit into the broader industry context. I see myself most in the writing, systems, and layouts of my work. For a closing remark, I would like to state that I want to bring my work on categorization and narrative to the design industry.